These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs. We are proud to stand with you.
The success of tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal, Television for Agricultural Business Decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources, in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Bryce Duskett, and thank you very much for joining us today on Market Journal. We've got a full lineup you won't want to miss on today's show. First, there's a new pest popping up in some Nebraska soybean fields, something to keep an eye on for 2025's growing season. Also dive into a Nebraska-made fertilizer called Nitro-Mag, now in mass production with a new plant opening in Grand Island. Plus, we'll break down the latest trends impacting the grain markets, and Eric Hunt is standing by with the latest when it comes to weather. All of that is coming up on today's edition of Market Journal, but let's begin here. Harvest is nearing the completion mark across the Cornhusker state. According to the latest numbers coming out from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as of this past week, corn harvest is about 80% complete. Soybeans are nearly wrapped up at about 95% complete. And for our producers out in the Panhandle, the dry edible bean harvest is about 96% done. With harvest winding down for many producers, there are still plenty of things to do and work to do in the months ahead. There's also several educational opportunities worth checking out. Next week kicks off the university's Center for Agricultural Profitability's Smart Money Ag Week. From November 4th through the 8th, there will be a number of webinars and workshops that aim to assist ag producers in honing in their ag financial literacy. These online and in-person events will highlight resources and information to help farmers and ranchers better manage financial risk and improve their overall business.
But we cover everything from leasing, like land leasing, how to negotiate that, what are current cash rental rates. We have cattle production costs. We have family living expenses this year, which include things like budgeting, investment savings, what you need for an emergency savings, because what you need for emergency savings for a farm and ranch is very different than an individual person or family, just because, again, you're an independent business, so you need to have a good bit of money in that emergency savings pot, as well as we have a discussion on debt, good versus bad debt, how to use debt in order to expand your business, and we have the Ag Budget Calculator. So that's a web-based application that you can, if you have corn, soybeans, wheat, there's a very long list of row crops and soon to be livestock that will be available on that. So the events are November 4th through the 8th, with the 4th, 6th, and 8th being hybrid events. So those will be available both online and in person, depending on your location. So check the website, see if it's available in your area, and you can go and then interact with people in real life, which is always great if you enjoy that sort of thing, which I do. So I will be hosting the North Platte event on the 4th and the 8th, and then I'll be presenting on the 6th myself. So.
Now, unfortunately, registration for the in-person workshops is currently closed. However, you are still able to sign up for the online hybrid events being hosted as part of the Smart Money Ag Week, and the events will include budgeting family living into cost of production on November 4th, saving and investment for farm and ranch well-being on November 6th, and navigating debt strategies for farms and ranches that will take place on November 8th. All hybrid events will begin at noon Central each of those 3 days, and registration for all three is free of charge. You can find out more information about these events and the registration details by visiting cap.unl.edu/smartmoney. We'll also be sure to post a link along with this story. Find that over on the Market Journal homepage. Well, last year, we introduced you to a man named Marcus Dennis from York, Nebraska. Like many before him, Marcus had an idea. So what did he do? He went out to his garage to experiment. The result of his work is now known as Nitro-Mag. With a new production plant in Grand Island, his dream is becoming reality. I had the chance to catch up with him at this year's Husker Harvest Days to learn more about Nitro-Mag and the future production plans. Market Journal's Mike Straub has this story.
It all started with a man, his garage, and his wife's blender. Since we last saw Marcus Dennis, that blender has gotten a whole lot bigger. Growth Technologies now has the ability to mass-produce Nitro-Mag at their new production plant located in Grand Island, Nebraska. But what is Nitro-Mag, and why should producers take notice of this new product?
Nitro-Mag is a liquid nitrogen fertilizer primarily. Part of it is the amine nitrogen side, which is a nitrogen that the plant uses to make amino acids with. All nitrogen goes into making amino acids. Now the second half of this story comes down to the other ingredients in it, which is magnesium and chloride, boron, and there's other trace minerals in it, but those are the ones that are doing carrying the heavy weight right now. So think of your leaves as a solar panel. To make it more efficient, you have to add chlorophyll to that leaf. The more chlorophyll you add to it, the more reaction with sunlight you have, the more energy you're going to produce. The more energy you produce has to go somewhere, and it's always a positive thing. It's either going to help the health of the plant, it's going to help the energy in the plant make more yield. Ultimately, it's all about yield. So at certain times, it's going to grow better roots. It's going to do a lot of things. So if you get a limited amount of sunshine, you want every ounce of that sun hitting on that leaf to count and make more energy. And that's a huge thing with this. And I don't know of any other product out there who says we have the ability to make more chlorophyll.
After years of research, development, and on-farm testing, both Marcus and Growth Technologies are ready to show the world what Nitro-Mag can do. After more than a year of construction, the new Growth Technologies plant in Grand Island, Nebraska has been completed and is producing Nitro-Mag fertilizer for local growers, with other blends of Nitro-Mag scheduled to roll out in the spring of 2025.
Hey, we started, broke ground probably last year, shortly after Husker Harvest Days. Getting pretty close to completed at the moment. We've got 4 2 million gallon tanks, so 8 million total storage there. We'll have a small tank farm full of 30,000 gallon tanks that gets built this winter. Hopefully we can produce and sell 10 million gallons in the coming year, but the plant should be able to do 20, 25 million gallons pretty easy if we need to. You know, it's kind of nice I'm from Nebraska, so we're building the plant in Nebraska, and we can hire Nebraska people to help run it. You know, hope to have 12 employees as we get rolling right here in Grand Island, Nebraska. So we like doing business local if we can.
At the end of the day, the end goal of all of this effort is to produce a product that contains what plants need at an affordable price for higher yields come harvest time. Since its inception, Nitro-Mag has been introduced to some of Nebraska's top growers, and through 7 years of testing, the fertilizer future looks promising.
There has been continuous testing by some of the toughest people in the country that test things, and that's called the American farmer. And so we've continued to have success with him, the farmer, on his level, and that's what has continued the growth. We've got a brand new plant just 2 miles up the road here with a huge capability, and we're looking forward to getting it in full production here, which basically it is right now. So we're out selling, and it works. There's nothing in this product that doesn't work. It's got the science behind it. It makes common sense, and it adds efficiency to the plant.
Even though production is on schedule for the 2025 growing season in Nebraska, the dream doesn't stop there. Eventually, Marcus and the folks at Growth Technologies are excited to reach markets beyond Nebraska and build similar plants around the relationships with producers all across the U.S. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.
Thanks for that story, Mike. We sure appreciate hearing a success story right here in Nebraska. Up next, joining me on the market desk is Jeff Peterson. He's the president of Heartland Farm Partners. Jeff, it's always good to have you here on the show. Thanks for making the time.
Oh, you bet. Always enjoy coming in and talking to you, Bryce.
Let's start on the corn market. Corn harvest nearly complete. I mentioned that kind of at the top of the show. USDA continues their projection for a record yield. At this point, how realistic do you think that is?
Yeah, I think as we dig in, I mean, our overall feel is that, yields in many areas were very good, but however, yields did get hurt by one, the harvest moisture coming in way below the 15 level. We've heard some reports of stuff all the way down to 10, and then over on the soybean side, you had stuff clear down in the 6s. But to come back on basically the harvest yield on the corn, I think what we're finding is we get into the tail end of that corn harvest, I think yields are coming back off just a little bit. And I think the biggest reason for that is that dry conditions, just the lack of subsoil. We just didn't have the moisture we needed to finish off that crop. So I think as we come in, I think we'll adjust USDA's yield down, but it's not going to be very much. It's probably only going to be, maybe a half bushel, a bushel at the most, and I think that would be probably pretty hard to do.
Bottom line for corn, plenty of supplies. How does the demand picture look? Yeah,
the demand picture actually looks really good, and you nailed it exactly. We've got plenty of supply out there, but there's a few things that we're really seeing on the demand side. The ethanol demand numbers, they're holding in there very well, and profitability is good enough at this point. Overall, if we look and see what the cattle on feed numbers are, numbers are strong enough there that I think we're going to be able to hit the feed demand numbers that USDA is laying out. And then you come over to the export side, and exports, honestly, on the corn side have looked really good. And the reason for that is because that safrinha corn crop last year out of Brazil was smaller than probably smaller than what the trade is expecting, but it's smaller. And if you think about that, that opens up the window for us to be able to have a nice longer export window on the corn side. And that'll take us clear back around until we get to probably, March into April into May of next year. Some would even say it could take us into June. The other thing that's helped us is the situation with Ukraine. Ukraine's production backed off because they had some dry conditions, also adjustment on acres. And so Ukraine, where last year they'd have been very competitive and the cheapest grain out there, well, this year's not the case. They're actually a little bit more expensive than us, so that opens up the door for some more U.S. corn exports.
Go from corn to soybeans, big picture, we continue to see a lot of pressure in that market, I'm sure largely because of the supply picture. Plenty of soybeans, not just in the U.S., but also expecting big production in South America this year. Yeah, they're definitely, and that's the thing that you're seeing us putting a little bit of price pressure and actually bring this back down and, putting the market right on the lows we ended up having on the January contract. Didn't quite get back there on the November contract, but yeah, their weather's really starting to pick up. Last numbers we'd have ended up seeing out of Brazil would have suggested they were probably by now around 40% planted, and that would be over on the soybean side, probably 55% type planted on the corn side. Now, a few things we want to watch though, that La Nina setup in the weather, even though it's a wet La Nina, what it's done is that it could give us some drier conditions in the northeast part of Brazil, also could bring in some drier conditions in the southern part of Brazil. And the southern part of Brazil is a little dry right now, but they were wet earlier. But the other part that's not getting a lot of talk is that as we go down to Cordova into Argentina, that also could bring some drier conditions down there. So I think that's something down the road that we're gonna have to keep an eye on. For both corn and soybeans, reality is no farmer's happy with the price right now. Does that mean we'll have to watch for basis opportunities locally? Yeah, that's exactly what that does mean. So let's just take a look at that. What we're finding already is we're seeing some nice improvements happening on the soybean side at both the processor level and also the elevator level. One thing I do want to remind everybody though, we're going to start seeing some shift in basically the bids where they're going to switch their bids from being based off of November futures for that November delivery to be based off of January. Immediately when we see that happen, we'll see those bids widen out, probably in some markets by about 10 cents. But I think what will happen is very quickly, because those bin doors have closed very strongly from the farmer side, and these commercial traders are going to need to do everything they can to get that grain to move, we're going to see some improvement on that bean basis additionally yet. Over on the corn side, we're not quite as far along. What we're noticing there is that you're starting to see in some of the areas where harvest is finishing up, you're starting to see some of the ethanol plants first improve their basis, and you're seeing the elevators follow along. As we're looking at that corn export demand, that's really good, as we mentioned a little bit ago. That's spilling over and giving us support on the basis. But here's the thing we really got to think about. On the basis side, the strong basis levels are here not because
basically we've got a lack of bushels. There's plenty of bushels out there. So what that means is that this year we're going to have to watch basis close, because if we get anything to run that futures price up, and there'll be things that will come along that will move it higher, as soon as that encourages movement of the cash bushels, then our basis will back off quickly. But in the time being, I think on both corn and beans, we'll see some stronger basis numbers yet.
All right, want to get a question in here quick about wheat, Jeff. Early to start the week, USDA came out with a crop progress report, showed the first look at winter wheat condition. Surprised some people how low that number is. My question for you today is, kind of in an uncertain climate right now, what are some of the risk management tools wheat growers can use?
Yeah, so basically I think the first thing we want to come back and then touch on is, what does the dry conditions, what does that good to excellent rating so low mean right now? Well, what our research would show is that doesn't necessarily correlate and mean we're going to have poor yields on wheat. It's just way too early to tell that. So I think from the risk management side, my hope would be is that most of them have some type of revenue-based crop insurance. By having that revenue-based crop insurance, that gives them the protection, whether you see that pullback in price or you see something on the yield side, but also what it does, it gives them the confidence to sell. Now, if they're not confident of making some sale at some point on the cash side, then they're going to need to step into the option market and use some puts or a combination of put and call strategy to physically be able to give them some protection on that wheat.
A good discussion there with Jeff. Now, coming up next week, I want to let you know what we'll be discussing. It will be the cattle markets, and Mike Briggs will join us to discuss the cattle markets, and as usual, probably get in a few other topics as well. If you have a question you want me to ask Mike, go ahead and email us or get in touch on social media. We'll gather those and certainly pass your questions along. A miracle man. That's what family and friends call Rodney DeCoste, a farmer from Firth, Nebraska. Back in November of 2019, he fell 40 feet from the top of an 18,000 bushel grain bin, and he lived to tell the story. It took countless surgeries, therapy, and an incredible amount of determination, but today he is still walking and farming alongside his son. You can read all about Rodney's remarkable story in the November issue of the Nebraska Farmer. It is that time of the show where we check in now on weather with Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Eric Hunt. Eric, harvest continues, but it is wrapping up for some producers across the state. How are things looking in the week ahead for those still moving toward the finish line?
Thanks, Bruce. I see some delays in the crystal ball. In terms of the drought monitor, we did see some additional expansion of severe drought across portions of central Nebraska. We did see more extreme drought introduced to more of the northern part of the Panhandle, Cherry County, and parts of northeastern Nebraska. This map shows you where counties in red have at least some portion of them in extreme drought. The counties in orange down along the Kansas border have at least some portion of them in severe drought that's been there for 8 consecutive weeks. And the counties in brown do have at least some portion of them in severe drought, but not yet for 8 consecutive weeks. In terms of precipitation, we did get some more precipitation we were expecting across portions of west central Nebraska, so that was good news. Unfortunately, the prognosis for better rainfall in the parts of the Panhandle did not come to fruition. They got a little bit, but not nearly as much as we were hoping for or needing. But we did do fairly well here across portions of southeastern Nebraska, where some places had upwards of 2.5 inches. And we did get some beneficial precipitation for the first time in weeks up here across portions of northeastern Nebraska. Soil moisture continues to be very, very low across the region. We are starting to see some improvements. So that's a good sign. Unfortunately, though, for portions of north central Nebraska, we just can't buy a drop of rain. There are portions of Cherry County that still have not had any, basically went the month of October without any precipitation. A lot of that area in general was very, very dry. But as a whole, October was much better than September statewide for precipitation. In terms of rain, we've got several chances of rain coming up for most of the state. Panhandle, a little sorry, probably not very good news for you. But anywhere east of North Platte, we have a pretty good chance of picking up very beneficial moisture this next week, because we have several chances of rain starting Saturday night into Sunday. Probably again Sunday night into Monday, and then again Monday night into Tuesday. Most places stand to probably get at least a half inch or more, and I think parts of eastern Nebraska will get well over an inch from this. On Sunday, though, we're going to have to watch out, though, for some severe thunderstorms, particularly across portions of central, maybe even eastern Nebraska. Biggest threat will be large hail, but I can't rule out tornadoes. Again, this threat would be biggest probably between about 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon and Sunday night. In terms of precipitation, like I mentioned, we are looking at pretty good chances of picking up at least a half inch or more for a lot of the state. And I think portions of eastern Nebraska stand a very good chance of picking up an inch. The European ensemble shows that there's even reasonable chance for portions of eastern Nebraska to pick up 2 inches or more. And if we go to our south and east, there's going to be chances for them to pick up 4 to 6 inches of rain in the next several days from this system. 8 to 14 day outlook does show better chances of increased precipitation totals across a lot of the central and southern plains. Biggest uncertainty right now is what's going to happen with an upper level low that may be down here again later in the week. If that ends up being relatively potent, then we may have a lot more precipitation than what is being currently projected across a lot of the central and southern plains, and even probably getting to the upper Midwest. In terms of temperatures, we are looking at probably being relatively mild for most of the week. I do think we'll be relatively chilly across portions of the Panhandle and west central Nebraska on Monday, with highs mostly in the 40s. Otherwise, I think we're looking at highs predominantly between 55 and 60, lows probably in the 20s in the Panhandle, low 30s to mid 30s elsewhere. Relatively warm on Sunday across eastern Nebraska, though. 8 to 14 day outlook shows it probably being fairly warm across most of this region through the middle of November. Swell temperatures right now are mostly in the 50s and low 60s across the state, with a few cooler readings out west. And we did have our latest ever 70-degree minimum temperature in the state of Nebraska in Falls City on Tuesday. Thanks, and back to you, Bryce.
All right, thank you very much for that update, Eric. Finally today, just as fields are drying down and harvest was nearing, the first case of a soybean field infested with Soybean Tentiform Leaf Miner was confirmed here in the Cornhusker State in late September. While there isn't too much for cause of concern at this point, it is a good idea for producers to familiarize themselves with this new arrival. And to do just that, Market Journal's Bill Dodd is standing by with this story.
Earlier this year, Soybean Tentiform Leaf Miner was found in Madison County. However, Nebraska producers and researchers don't have much information on this particular defoliating pest. The first reports of the leaf miner came from 2 counties near the Twin Cities metro area in Minnesota back in 2021. And with this new arrival, we're learning all we can with the assistance of the University of Minnesota.
Right now, the good part for us is the University of Minnesota has been doing a lot of the biology and life cycle work. It's not all released quite yet, but it is coming very soon, so we will have that to work with. That's that sharing of knowledge piece that's so incredibly important. Having the know who to contact let us identify and confirm that pest very quickly, so I had that answer back that Friday. That's how fast that turned around in terms of getting that identified. So this pest has only been found in Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, and now Nebraska. Nebraska is the most recent find. There were no finds in 2023 for new states, but Nebraska is the new one for 2024. I've not heard if there's been any others, but at the time when I was talking to Dr. Cook, we were the only one for 2024 for adding a new state. So there will be some efforts with specialists here at the university. I plan on jumping on board with this too in terms of future collaborations as we move forward with this pest.
As we know very little about this pest currently, no one should hit the panic button by any means. While this pest has shown the ability to create an economic impact on crops in Minnesota, an infestation doesn't necessarily mean drastic loss in yield. However, it's something producers should be aware of.
In terms of economic impact, we're not really sure how that's going to play out. We have one field that we found at the end of the growing season. There's been mixed impacts in Minnesota. They can cause some yield reduction. They can also not. They're a little interesting because they kind of act like a defoliator, and we're used to seeing things chew on soybean leaves here. These are a little different because they chew on the undersides in between the leaf layers. So they don't remove the entire surface of the leaf from top to bottom, just on that underside. So it's kind of like a defoliator situation, but it's a little bit different. And the leaf miner name, yeah, as that name implies, the egg is laid and then that caterpillar tunnels up through between the leaves towards the bottom side of that leaf. So there's the upper layer, the bottom layer, and you see this white patch on the underside of the leaf. Starts out as a serpentine mine, so it looks like a snake wandering through the leaf, small and white. And then as that larva grows, it turns into more of a blotch. And then later, it starts to feed on a little bit more of that upper level tissue towards that upper leaf surface, and it causes it to pucker. And it almost looks like a Civil War era tent for a soldier with that angles and the point up with the old pole tent there. So that's kind of where it gets the name, Tentiform Leaf Miner, so think of it like a tent, and those are on the underside. What we do know in terms of biology is that it's going to be multiple generations per year, so those mines can accumulate over the growing season. So towards the end of the year, it looks a lot worse than when they get started. And then just one note, this is a native insect. It very well could be here in Nebraska for a long time, and no one's found it or reported it. It's from American hog peanut and sickle seed fuzzy bean. I know it sounds funny, but that's what they're named. They are two plants in the legume family. Both of them are annuals, just like soybean is. Both of them have a trifoliate leaf, just like soybean. So there's some similarities there and closely related plant species.
The sighting of tentiform leaf miners in Nebraska soybean fields could have gone unrecognized if not for the quick thinking of one Madison County producer. When this pest was spotted, a quick call to his local extension education center got the ball rolling on its identification, and plans are now in place to keep close tabs on any further spread throughout Nebraska.
We got permission to go out to the producer's field, which was slated to be, this is Friday afternoon, and it's slated to be harvested next week. So this was down by the wire, and we get out there, and sure enough, even though we're missing about 80–90% of the leaves on the plants, we're able to find it pretty readily. Extension is a great resource. If the person you contact doesn't know, odds are they know who to contact to get you that answer that you need. It doesn't matter whether it's crop production, livestock production, it's all something that we can generally help with or get you pointed in the right direction when you need some information like this. For the next growing season, I think it's just going to be trying to map out where this thing is. We know it's in Madison County. It wasn't like it was just a plant here or there. There were plenty of plants that were hit. So it's going to be a matter of mapping out where across the state that this has been found. And if you do find it as a producer or an agronomist, report that in. Pictures, this is fairly easy to identify, especially when the larvae are in the later stages, and that mine is very easy to tell what it is. So that's going to be the big thing, is reporting that into the extension system so we know where we can find it.
While there are currently no known management methods for this insect, growing season surveys of soybean fields will be a high priority for Nebraska Extension researchers heading into the 2025 growing season. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
To learn more about Soybean Tentiform Leaf Miner and some of the current topics that might be impacting your operation, we invite you to visit the website cropwatch.unl.edu. Well, folks, that's about all the time we have for this week's broadcast. But if you did miss one of our stories, I want to remind you that we've uploaded a lot of our content to YouTube and over on social media, where we invite you to join in on the conversation. And remember, you can now watch Market Journal on Acres TV, a free streaming platform you can put right on your smartphone or your smart TV. Hope to see you back here next time. But until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.